Ukraine achieved a major breakthrough in the south, and they also used brand new weapons. And at the same time, Russians, feeling the pressure from Ukrainians, started fleeing from several front lines, and one of them is Bakhmut. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. And so in this first picture is, I would say, the most patriotic fridge in the entire Russia. It's like the more Putin magnets you collect, the more patriotic you are. Something definitely worth sharing on the social media. So just let me know in the comments, would you like a fridge like this? But okay, now to some more Russian news, which are still relatively ridiculous. So yesterday, Vladimir Putin met with the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. Allegedly, it's him and not his double, because the real Lukashenko might have been poisoned, but okay, so jokes aside, they met, and Lukashenko was just sitting like a very good student in front of his professor, listening to every single word he's saying, and Putin was just saying, so we will put nuclear weapons on the territory of your country, do you have any objections? Lukashenko said, no, we are good here, you can do this, I allow this, probably once again fearing for his life. And later on, Putin made some of his classic statements. He basically mentioned that he knows the counteroffensive of Ukraine has already started. Ukrainians are pressuring very hard, but they're also losing way more people than they used to. And Russians, they're successfully repelling every single attack. I have no idea who is giving him this news, but this is what he says. And well, every single one of us right here, you and me, we already knew it, even before Putin, that the counteroffensive of Ukrainians is on its way. Because I'm trying my best to deliver the freshest information possible for you. And if you don't want to miss any of these most recent updates in the near future, just please like this video and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram, because today I will be watching the Stanley Cup final game in person, and I'll be posting some Instagram stories. The link will be down below. Alright, and now just please allow me to give you literally a couple of words about the Western support to Ukraine, and then we'll talk update from the east of Ukraine, the south, Kakhovka dam situation, major breakthrough of Ukrainians in the south, and Russians fleeing from multiple front lines. And first of all, according to some military representatives of Poland, Ukraine is set to receive F-16 fighter jets within the next 2 to 3 months. Next we have the picture of Swedish armored combat vehicles SV-9040, which are allegedly already in Ukraine. And then the US is pledging $2.1 billion more in military support to Ukraine, which will include Patriot missiles and some additional ammunition. And speaking about Russia, Ramzan Kadyrov released this video where there were allegedly Chinese military vehicles being employed by Chechen soldiers. And according to some experts, this might have been the very first official but yet undeclared support of China to Russia in this war, because these military vehicles, particularly these ones, they will not be able to be sent to Russia without the approval from the Communist Party of China. So most likely China is now supporting Russia more directly. Alright, and now as promised, let me give you a very quick update from the middle and the east of Ukraine, and then we'll talk about Russians fleeing from Bakhmut. And first of all, we have a video from Voronezh region, bordering next to Ukraine, where as you can see, allegedly a Ukrainian drone has been intercepted by an anti-drone radar gun, and it fell into a civilian building. Then we go to already notorious Belgorod, and allegedly another Ukrainian drone crashed into an administrative building inside this city. Going now back to Ukraine, to the middle region of Zhytomyr, we can see that unfortunately Ukrainians were able to intercept a Russian missile above the city, but the debris destroyed some civilian infrastructure on the ground. And then 2 more missile attacks were against Uman. The very first one, Russian attack, destroyed a car wash, and the second one destroyed a local marketplace. And as always, way more photos and videos of the last 24 hours incidents inside Ukraine, along with its full versions, will be available on my Patreon. The link is down below and there is still 1 week of free access. And just overall, Russians launched 4 missiles and 14 drones against Ukraine in the last day, and Ukrainians were able to intercept all 4 missiles and 10 drones. Now let's get back to the east of Ukraine, and first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians conducted a limited offensive along Kupiansk-Svatoye-Kreminny front line with no success at all, but at the same time, Ukrainians were able to make some limited gains around Bakhmut. And specifically, according to the representative of the Ukrainian army Serhiy Cherivatay, Ukrainians were able to advance as much as 1,200 meters deeper inside Bakhmut. And while these territorial gains are not yet reflected by this map, we can already see that Russians started fleeing pretty much across the entire Bakhmut front line, all the way from Orikhovo-Vasilievka to Kurdyumivka. And interestingly enough, according to the Russian infiltrator in Donetsk region Denis Pushilin, he said that as soon as Ukrainians leave Bakhmut alone, this is when we can finally start putting the police and other administrative social services inside the city. I have no idea literally in which kind of world he lives. Russians just literally started fleeing from this city. But once again, this is what he said. And then we even have this drone footage somewhere from the eastern front lines, which show how much more professional Ukrainians became recently in operating drones. Unfortunately, I'm not also able to show the consequences because of YouTube being YouTube. That is why the full version is also on my Patreon. The link is down below. And just overall, in the last 24 hours alone, Ukrainians were able to destroy 18 concentration of Russian forces, 4 air defense systems, 5 command posts, and 8 artillery units. Alright, and right before we talk about the major breakthrough of Ukrainians in the south, let's quickly talk about the similar update from the south, an update on Kakhovka dam situation. And in comparison to the previous day, the water levels overall in Kherson region decreased by 20 centimeters, approximately 3,600 houses are still flooded and 2,400 residents have been evacuated. But still, unfortunately, during the evacuation, Russians were shelling the volunteers and those civilians trying to get away from the water. As we move closer to Zaporizhzhia region located hundreds of kilometers away from Kakhovka dam, in some of the local water reservoirs, the water has completely already left them. And according to the local authorities of Kryvyi Rog, by the way, the birthplace of President Zelensky, the water interruptions inside the city might last up to 1.5 months. As we get closer to Odessa, we can see that still some household items, as big as entire fridges, start approaching the city, and even this cute little dog, which was drifting standing on the wood across the Black Sea, and luckily it got close to Odessa to be rescued. And if we take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control, we can see that as a result of this flooding, the left side of Dnipro river was mainly affected, which made Russians severely go further away from their first lines of defenses. Alright, and now just literally a couple more words from the south, and then we'll talk about the major breakthrough of Ukrainians. And first of all, as you can see from this video, some very loud noises have been reported in Henichensk, which is very close to the border with Crimea. Next we go to Hulai Pole, already located in Zaporizhzhia region, and as a result of a Russian attack, a local hospital has been severely damaged, and unfortunately there are casualties. And ultimately, some more loud noises have been reported by the locals in Berdyansk, as you can see from this picture. And now, as promised, let's talk about the major breakthrough of Ukrainians in the south. So recently, some very heavy combat activities have been reported all the way from Robotyne to Malotokmachka, and also at the same time in Lapkove. And the very first area where Ukrainians reportedly successfully breached the defenses of Russians were exactly next to Lapkove. We even have this entire 6, almost 7 minutes video of this counteroffensive. Obviously, I'm not able to show the full version here. As always, its entire version is on my Patreon. The link is down below as well. But wait, there is more, because right now, as reported by Russians, Ukrainians were also able to achieve significant progress on this vertical front line, if you can call this like this, from Orikhiv all the way to Tokmak. And this specific city is located 25 kilometers away from the front lines. Ukrainians were even able to force Russians to flee from these front lines as well, just like they did in Bakhmut, and captured some prisoners of war. And while doing this, Ukrainians were using their brand new equipment, such as Leopard 2 tanks and Storm Shadow missiles. And I know, yes, most probably it is not the very first time Ukrainians are using them on the front lines, but this is most certainly the very first successful use of the Western military weapons. But unfortunately, every offensive has its costs, and Ukrainians lost 4 infantry combat fighting vehicles, Bradleys, and 1 Leopard 2 tank. Another Leopard 2 tank has been severely damaged, but Ukrainians, unlike Russians, instead of abandoning it, they took it back, towed it behind the front lines, and now they're working on it to repair it. And you know what? Even the most aggressive pro-Russian government authorities in the past, such as Dmitry Rogozin, yes, the guy who got his buttocks injured, he basically is now saying that the actual real counteroffensive of Ukrainians has not even started yet, because Ukrainians, they hold several dozens tanks on these front lines, and they are getting ready to apply the NATO tactics of going with these tanks like this. So most likely this is most certainly is going to crush the lines of defenses of Russians, all of this according to Dmitry Rogozin. But, I mean, the official position of the Ministry of Defense of Russia remains pretty much unchanged. In just 3 days they were able to eliminate several thousand Ukrainians as a result of this counteroffensive. They were able to destroy 52 Leopard 2 tanks and several hundred other armored military vehicles. I mean, at this rate, it feels like that Ministry of Defense of Russia will destroy the entire military supply of everything in the world. But, I mean, we already understand how much we can trust anything that comes from the mouths of Ministry of Defense of Russia or their propagandists. So, which means that in reality, when they make statements like this, it means that they are scared and they want to hide the reality behind these beautiful numbers for Russian propaganda. But most likely, Ukrainians slowly but surely are succeeding, and eventually the pace of this counteroffensive will pick up, and then it will start increasing in geometrical progression. And I'm not expecting the Ministry of Defense of Russia to acknowledge that they started losing. Most likely it will be the same as the end of the Second World War, whenever they will suddenly surrender and sign all the documents they will be presented. So let's wait and see, hopefully one day this will happen, and if you don't want to miss it, because I will make sure to report this, can you please subscribe to my channel? It only takes 1 click. The best way to support my work will be through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for attention, товарищи, and see you on Tuesday.